Northwestern University says it plans to tear down Ryan Field and build a smaller stadium. That stadium's almost 100 years old, Mick, right? How do you think neighbors and alumni, students who currently go there, how are they going to feel about that?
Yeah, and suckers like me who are season ticket holders for Northwestern football. I'm glad you asked because...
I have thoughts.
Yeah, the average Saturday afternoon, even when the team is good, which so far this year, unfortunately, they're not, but even when the team is winning, if the stadium is full, it's usually half to 2/3 the visiting team, fans of the visiting team. And so Northwestern has an atmosphere problem, among other things. So this current plan is to reduce the capacity of the new stadium from 47,000, which current Ryan Field is, to about 35,000, which is pretty small by major college football standards. Now, some would argue that Northwestern doesn't play major college football, but I think the point is that they're trying to not only build a first-rate facility, which, like all the stadiums these days, they could use for other purposes.
Seems
concerts,
like it needs an upgrade.
but it needs an upgrade. It doesn't look 100 years old, but it looks pretty old. So This fan is all in favor of a new strategy.
It's going to be expensive, though, Natalie. $800 million.
There are 3 Northwestern graduates here. And I have to say, I went there for graduate school, but I went to a historically Black college for undergrad. So
which one, Natalie?
I don't have to say it.
Please, tell us.
Howard University.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the football games there are much different, where you don't even go to the game. You're just outside of the game, just having a good time. So I don't even know what the Big Ten football experience is like, but I am motivated to go to a game at some point so I can experience the difference and see what this money would be spent on.
Heather, in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood, opposition to the city's last scrap metal shredding operation, that seems to be growing. Tell us about this latest effort here.
It is. So, there was all sorts of controversy about the move of General Iron from Lincoln Park to the southeast side that was eventually blocked by the city. And it focused a lot of attention on, as you said, the last remaining facility that can take cars and other sort of, discarded metal and basically recycle them. But to do that, it is a polluting business. And right now it's in Pilsen, which is experiencing a lot of gentrification, a lot of housing pressures. And there are people there who say, look, if this operation is not appropriate for Lincoln Park, it is not appropriate for Pilsen. And the facility has had some struggles with complying with EPA regulations. So there's some hope that there can be enforcement mechanisms to sort of either shut this down or to change its operations. But it's, I think, another story that sort of says, well, if this isn't appropriate for a white area of the city, why do we tolerate it in a primarily Latino neighborhood? And there are a lot of questions about, that. And also, if you are, somebody who's concerned about the environment, don't you want facilities that recycle these sort of, situations? You don't want these, this stuff ending up in landfills. So it's a really, really difficult decision, and one that I think really sort of illuminates what we've been really talking about, except for the Northwestern part, all hour, is sort of the struggle in sort of, who does the city serve? Who does the city protect? And how do those people get to shape their own futures?
Such a good point there. Let's talk about the migrants who have been arriving in busloads from Texas. More have arrived here this week. Give us the latest on the situation for these folks and the sort of help that they're getting, Heather.
So I did a little bit of math before we came on the air, and just in the past 7 days, 675 migrants from Texas have arrived in Chicago. Now, that is not, a lot if you think about the city's population of nearly 3 million people, but it is a significant pressure on the city's shelter system and its ability to sort of offer help to these people who are coming to Chicago with not really more than anything other than the clothes on their back. So
and sick sometimes,
yes,
needing medical attention.
Needing medical care. And so it has really turned into not sort of a response by the city, but a response by the city and the state and the surrounding suburbs. And the latest plan calls for some of these immigrants to go to Des Plaines.
Right.
And, to get help there as they sort of transition. But I think the question is, these buses have arrived every day this week. And at what point can the system no longer begin to help people, and what happens then? I think it's a question that a lot of city officials and state officials, frankly, are struggling to deal with.
Yeah, to your earlier point, Heather, Shamrock Bloom on YouTube says environmental injustice is a real thing.
Yeah.
I want to shift to the election. Early voting in the November 8th election began. People have also been opening their mailboxes and they're finding applications for mail-in ballots. Let's talk about a couple of choices, though, that they'll be facing. There's a so-called workers' rights amendment on the ballot.
That's right. So
what's that going to do?
It's designed to basically ensure that everybody in Illinois has the right to organize their employer, and that it essentially makes it a part of the Illinois Constitution that this would never be a state where lawmakers could pass legislation that would sort of restrict those rights. Now, this is really a legacy of former Governor Bruce Rauner, who wanted to sort of reduce unionization in Illinois, and to sort of, he saw unions as a political opponent, and he took direct aim at them. This is sort of the union sort of, ecosystem responding and saying, we're going to make sure that even if another Republican governor is elected in the future, they won't be able to target these union rights, essentially.
Any other interesting things on the ballot that our listeners should be aware of?
I mean, there's a governor's race. It's not that big a deal. I don't know if you've heard anything about it. Yeah.
Interesting in the eyes of the beholder, I suppose.
Exactly. I think a lot of people are watching the Secretary of State's race. Alexi Janulius is the Democratic nominee. He also just got $1 million from Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's been getting out the checkbook for election time in recent days. And, the backstory there is, of course, that Pritzker backed City Clerk Ana Valencia over Giannoulias, but now everybody's one big happy Democratic family.
Oh.
So, $1
million makes people happy.
It does.
So, yeah, it's funny how that works.
Natalie, have you been noticing political ads? I don't see them much.
No, and that's probably because we don't have a television right now.
Here we've talked in the past few weeks about these controversial political ads, some particularly by this group that calls itself People Who Play by the Rules. Governor Pritzker's now threatening to sue this PAC and TV stations that run their ads. You have details on that, Heather?
So this ad in particular includes a woman saying in the initial version of the ad that Governor J.B. Pritzker fired her because she was a political opponent of him. Oh. And J.B. Pritzker says, look, you can't say that. It's not true. You have no facts to support that. And People Who Play by the Rules PAC, which is run by radio guy Dan Proft, said, yeah, actually, we don't. So they edited the ad to take that allegation out of the ad, which is, usually a pretty good indication that you have made a claim that you cannot support.
I feel like every week we're talking about a different ad by these people who play by the rules.
Dan Proft is really taking on a fascinating racial angle with his work. So the woman in this ad is a Black woman. And then those mailers that have been going out that look like newspapers have been going. I don't know everywhere that they're going, but they are hitting the South Side. Someone tweeted me and said, have you seen them? Yeah. I said, no. The next day I was at my mother-in-law's house and I saw them. And I was like, oh, and this is in South Shore.
Yeah.
So, Pritzker has a lot of Black support. And so it was not lost on me that, if Proft is trotting out this Black woman to say Pritzker fired me, despite there being no proof, and putting these mailers out that are, again, that look like legitimate newspapers that I wouldn't say are just it's fine if you are not for this candidate, but we're just seeing so much misinformation in the culture that we're in right now of fakeness. It goes beyond political opposition. It's going into fabrication.
Well, yeah. And Dan Proft, just to be clear, is behind those fake newspapers as well. So Dan is a longtime conservative political operative in Illinois, although he now lives in Florida, closer to his new crush, I think, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, who is also sending, asylum seekers to other states up north. And Dan is funded primarily, the People Play by the Rules Super PAC is funded by Richard Uihlein, one of the wealthiest donors of conservative causes in Illinois and around the country. And, his ads that are pushing these racial buttons, I think are, Natalie, they're not designed to try to chip off Black support from J.B. Pritzker. I mean, if he got that, I think that I'm sure he would welcome it. But they're really designed, in my opinion, to make white people feel good about voting for a right-wing candidate running for governor. If you have a Black person on the ad saying J.B. Pritzker did her wrong, it's sort of another path to the same goal of showing, Black people allegedly committing crimes on videos, which he's also done in some of these other ads. So it's all part of a scheme to try to play on different kinds of fears. But he knows that his voting base for the right is not on the south side of Chicago.
I think it's perhaps even more insidious than that. I think that the only way that I think Darren Bailey, the Republican nominee, could defeat J.B. Pritzker is if there is a significant drop in turnout in Chicago among Black and Latino voters. And I think when you see those mailers, especially if you're somebody who's not sort of plugged in or sort of really sort of understanding sort of what they're looking at, you can sort of see that and say, gosh, I don't know. I don't want to vote. I don't want to vote for a bad guy. I don't want to vote for somebody who's making me feel queasy. And that is helpful for a Republican candidate who's going to win downstate. He's going to win central Illinois. Yeah. So it doesn't even have to be that you go out and you vote for Darren Bailey.
Yeah, I think you're totally right.
It could just be that you're somebody who doesn't want to vote for somebody who might have done a Black woman wrong.
You're putting a seed of doubt.
Right.
That's right.
There.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why J.B. Pritzker was like, I will sue you. You take that down right now.
Let's take a pause right there. Guys, you're getting a lot of love on social media. Shamrock Bloom says, I love Natalie Moore and her reporting. And Christopher says, this is a rock star panel. That's WTTW Channel 11 Chicago politics reporter Heather Cherone, WBEZ reporter Natalie Moore, and Mick Dumke, who reports for ProPublica. Stick around, more weekly news recap to come. But first, Hurricane Ian. It's heading for the Carolinas. Here's Claire.
Yes, a revived